Dear friends, welcome to the Diary of World War II. In the early hours of June 6, 1944, telephones rang endlessly across German military headquarters in Paris, Caen, and Berlin. Fragmented messages poured in from radar stations along the French coast, reporting an unusual sight over the English Channel: hundreds of ships moving toward France. At first, many officers dismissed it as a mistake. For months, the German High Command had believed the Allied invasion would come through the Pas de Calais, the narrowest point between France and England. After all, every report from German agents in London, supposedly reliable, confirmed it. Only later would it become clear that every one of those agents had been captured and turned into double agents by the British. While the generals hesitated, more than 11,000 Allied aircraft crossed the skies over Normandy, dropping thousands of paratroopers behind enemy lines. The invasion had begun, and Germany was unprepared. But to understand how Hitler's Germany reacted to the largest amphibious landing in history, we must first understand how its own war machine had been deceived. The success of D-Day began long before the first soldier set foot on French soil. Through Operation Fortitude, part of a massive deception plan, the Allies created an entire phantom army in southern England. Inflatable tanks, fake radio traffic, and even fictitious generals convinced German intelligence that the main attack would come at Calais. General George Patton, the Allies' most aggressive commander, was used as bait. Nazi intelligence swore he would lead the invasion and reported it to Berlin as fact. It was all a masterful illusion. When the real troops landed in Normandy, the German elite still believed it was only a diversion. The chief of operations at the OKW, Alfred Jodl, even labeled the first reports a likely observer error. That belief led Hitler to make a fatal mistake. He refused to release the panzer divisions that could have repelled the invaders on the beaches. The German command lost precious hours that changed history. But the issue ran deeper than one strategic error. It revealed a system paralyzed by fear, bureaucracy, and total dependence on one man. As Allied paratroopers fought across the Norman countryside, Hitler was still asleep in his mountain headquarters in Bavaria. The generals around him knew he hated being awakened early, and none dared disturb him. When he was finally informed, late in the morning, he exploded in anger. Yet, consumed by paranoia, he convinced himself this was merely a feint. He believed the true invasion would come at Calais, and thus ordered the panzer divisions to remain in reserve, waiting for an attack that never came. Meanwhile, the hours slipped away. By nightfall, over 156,000 Allied soldiers had landed, and the beachheads were firmly secured. To Hitler, this was not yet the beginning of the end. It was the ultimate test of Germany's willpower. But that blind obsession with total resistance would plunge the Reich into military and psychological collapse in the weeks ahead. Two of Germany's most seasoned marshals commanded the defense of France: Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, and Gerd von Rundstedt, a veteran of the First World War. Rommel believed the only hope of victory was to stop the Allies on the beaches before they could establish a foothold. Rundstedt disagreed. He wanted to preserve the panzer divisions for a deeper, coordinated counterattack, but both were trapped in a rigid system where only Hitler could authorize major troop movements. By the time permission was granted, chaos ruled the roads. Allied bombers had destroyed bridges, convoys, and communications. Air superiority made moving tanks by daylight nearly suicidal. Rommel saw the disaster unfolding. On July 17th, he was severely wounded when his car was strafed by British aircraft and removed from command. Without him, the Western Front lost its most pragmatic voice. As the generals struggled with reality, Joseph Goebbels launched a different kind of offensive, a war of words and illusions. Germany's propaganda minister understood that panic could destroy the Reich faster than bullets. In the first days after D-Day, radio bulletins described the landings as limited and under control. But the truth could not be hidden for long. Goebbels switched strategies. On June 18, 1944, he published an article in Das Reich titled "The Background of the Invasion." He framed the landings as a new test of endurance, calling for total war. He declared that the enemy had opened a front in the west, and that Germany would throw them back into the sea. In cinemas, newsreels showed smiling soldiers digging trenches in Normandy, while the narrator proclaimed, "The German people will face fire and steel with unshakable faith in victory." Goebbels mastered the art of denial. By pretending the invasion was just a temporary setback, he kept the illusion of control alive. But his propaganda collided with the grim reality that ordinary Germans were beginning to feel for themselves. When news of the invasion spread, many Germans simply refused to believe it. For years, they had been told of endless victories and the army's invincibility. Now, the enemy was back on European soil. In major cities, the mood swung between anxiety and fatalism. Reports from the Sicherheitsdienst, the Nazi security service, reveal a population reacting with disbelief and growing fear about the future. Families began hiding valuables, expecting heavier bombings. Letters from soldiers spoke of brutal fighting, fuel shortages, and chaos along the roads. In the factories, rumors spread that the army could no longer contain the Allied advance. The myth of the unstoppable German machine was collapsing. Still, many clung to hope, waiting for a miracle weapon or some divine intervention, illusions Goebbels carefully nurtured. But the atmosphere had changed. For the first time since Stalingrad, the German people felt that fate had turned against them. And within the regime, despair was turning into fanaticism. In the days following the invasion, Hitler ordered a series of desperate counterattacks to push the Allies back into the sea. The 21st Panzer Division attempted a counterstrike on June 6th itself, but was stopped by naval gunfire and relentless air attacks. Other panzer divisions only managed to move the next day, when the opportunity had already passed. Seeing the hopeless situation, Field Marshal Rundstedt reportedly told a fellow officer, "The war is lost. Try to make peace." Though the exact wording is uncertain, such remarks led to his dismissal later that month. The Luftwaffe, once feared across Europe, was now virtually absent over Normandy. Lacking pilots, fuel, and planes, it could do little more than watch from afar. Allied air superiority was absolute. Inside the Nazi hierarchy, resentment festered. In secret, senior officers began discussing the only remaining option, removing Hitler himself. Just weeks later, this desperation would culminate in the July 20th plot in Berlin. D-Day had not only opened a new front in the West, it had shattered the psychological spell of the Third Reich, the myth of German invincibility. The Normandy invasion marked the beginning of the end. In the following weeks, France was liberated, and Germany's collapse became inevitable. The army no longer trusted its command, the people no longer trusted propaganda, and even Hitler no longer trusted reality itself. For Germany, D-Day was more than a military defeat. It was the day fear returned, the fear that had been absent since 1939. And when the sun set on June 6, 1944, the Third Reich still stood, but its fate was already sealed.